Hello everyone, Eric Champagne here for a new episode of the Public Governance Diaries. Every so often, the Center on Governance welcomes visiting scholars from Canada and around the world. We also enjoy a very successful partnership with Fulbright Canada to manage one of their prestigious visiting research chairs for American researchers, the Research Chair in Governance and Public Administration. Actually, if you're watching this video and if you qualify for this program, please visit our websites to find out more how to apply as a Fulbright Chair at the University of Ottawa. In 2022, we had the great privilege of welcoming Professor Goktug Morcol. Goktug is a professor of public policy and administration at Penn State University at Harrisburg. At the end of his visit, we sat down for a talk on business improvement areas, which is a common practice within large cities in America and Europe, and the focus of Goktug's research during his visit to the University of Ottawa. And I must say that it's a great governance topic, as the success of these organizations relies to a large degree on a sound collaboration between the public and the private sector. So I invite you to watch this very interesting interview. And before you go, please stay in touch for more episodes of the Public Governance Diaries by following us on our social media. Thanks for listening, and I hope to see you soon. Goktug, thank you for accepting our invitation.
Thank you. Thank you for hosting me for all these 4.5 months, I think, at this point. It's been a wonderful experience.
Wonderful. We were so glad to have you during that period at the Center on Governance. So today, Goktug, I would like to discuss with you about business improvement areas within the more general conceptual framework of complex governance network. Let's start with a rather general question. What is a business improvement area and why are they important?
Well, thank you. This is a great question because actually they are quite important, and there are very few people even know about them.
That's true.
So that's why I would like to maybe give a brief description of them. Business improvement areas, or otherwise known as business improvement districts, that's the more common name in the United States and in some provinces of Canada too. What they are is that these are designated areas, typically commercial corridors, downtowns, that kind of area. Mm-hmm. And they are designated by local governments under the state or provincial laws. And there is also a designated organization. Typically, the status of that organization changes from one province to the other or one country to the other one, but they may be non-profits, they may be sub-local governments or other kinds of entities. These entities collect additional taxes from the businesses or property owners in that designated area. So there's additional tax involved. And then they provide additional services. Mm-hmm. These services are cleaning and beautification of the area and promotion of the area, like in festivals, for example, street festivals, or policy advocacy on behalf of the businesses in that area. In some cases, the scope may expand and they include strategic planning for the area. For example, how do you redesign a streetscaping in a particular area so that it will be more enjoyable and more attractive and so forth. And depending on the size and scale of the particular business improvement area or business improvement district, these organizations that are governing them or providing services to them, they can take on smaller functions or larger functions. So there's a whole variation among them. But they are important because they are providing these services. They are fulfilling all these functions in really important areas in our cities. If you think about that, these commercial corridors and downtowns, they make a city livable, essentially. Mm-hmm. They are the commercial hubs or centers of what's going on in a city. So these entities contribute to the vitality of those areas. In doing so, I think they contribute to our social life as well as economic life. If you think about that again, it's people go to those areas to entertain themselves, to socialize, to not only have good time, but also interact with other people, to do maybe more business, or maybe, come up with new ideas, creativity, and so on and so forth. So they are really important areas, and these entities serving these areas are important too, because they are contributing to the livelihood, the liveliness of those areas. Another, I think, interesting thing about business improvement areas is that they never work alone. They always collaborate with first local governments, other nonprofits, private organizations, and a variety of individuals of various kinds. So why this is important is because now these days in public policy, public administration, we are talking about governance processes. And governance essentially is about how do these different entities collaborate and cooperate, or sometimes conflict too, in providing social services or public services. So if you look at it that way, these entities, business improvement areas or districts, are actors in that larger governance process. And that is what I want to understand in my studies. How does this governance process in urban areas work? And particularly, how do these little known entities, but very important entities, contributing to it?
Well, that was actually my next question, Goktug. I wanted to better understand the purpose of and the objectives of your research during your visit at the University of Ottawa, where you were exposed to Canadian cities and Canadian municipalities. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Sure. My general study area actually is this governance processes and the role of business improvement areas in them. In this particular research, I'm looking at this, again, the same issue, but in the particular context of COVID-19 pandemic. Obviously, it's very, very important. It has affected our lives in a variety of ways in the last couple of years. So the business improvement areas of districts have been impacted by COVID, obviously. We all have. So my question was, my first research question was, how did COVID affected these business improvement areas? And the second question, related question, was how did they cope with it? How did it change them? How did they change in this process? And I found, I think, a few interesting things. First, as expected, they have been impacted really badly in many ways. I mean, the economies have been shattered, and all these businesses were closed, temporarily at least for a while. And if you think about the particular characteristics of these business improvement areas, they have been impacted even more than many other businesses, because in these areas, in many of business improvement areas, there are lots of restaurants, cultural venues and entertainment venues and so forth. And they were the ones, of course, impacted most severely by COVID-19 and the lockdowns that related to that. So unsurprisingly, I found that they have been impacted very, very badly. But I also found that the government programs that were created both in Canada and the United States helped them to a very large extent, because of that, many of the businesses are still viable. They did not collapse completely or disappear completely. So that was an important issue. Government help was very, very important. But I also found some other things that I wasn't sure, I wasn't exactly expecting, or I did not know what to expect in those areas. I think probably the most important thing what I found was that the role and importance of business improvement area management organizations, those entities that are providing services in the areas, they increased during the COVID-19 pandemic.
Okay.
How so? Well, what happened was they became more and more information hubs.
Okay.
They have always been that way. Actually, they are always they process information, they communicate with their members, all these businesses and property owners, as well as governments, and they are kind of conduits between the two, and they always did that. But because of the intensity of the pandemic, and because of the way the pandemic affected these areas particularly, these entities began to play much more important roles. That's what I found. Their connections with all their businesses and property owners and other entities and governments, they became much more intense, much more frequent. In my interviews, they told me that they had these weekly, bi-weekly meetings and all these different kinds of connections and how they were helping their members and all that. So it was a very intense period. Another thing that I found out was, again, this is something that I didn't have in my mind, but they told me that because of the pandemic, obviously, and because if you think about the nature of these businesses, these are in-person businesses. In other words, you go to a restaurant to have meal, and then what happens if you shut it off? Now they had to move some of their operations online. Again, for example, these delivery services. Or if you think about some of the, let's say, some gift shops, which are, again, quite typical in these business improvement areas, they are not selling products in person. Now what do you do? Then again, you move it to online. And so there's a strong trend toward online presence, social media usage and other means on the internet. That increased and intensified. And these business improvement area management organizations played very significant roles in them. Just to give you an example, these business improvement areas, by the way, they have their own associations. Like there is one in Ottawa, there is one in Toronto, there is also a provincial one, Ontario. And all these entities, these associations, played even more important roles, coordinating and communicating with their own members, which are business improvement areas. And one of the initiatives is that, I believe it is called Digital Mainstream, which is a very important program. It's a collaboration between the provincial government, in Ontario, and I understand the federal government is contributing to that too, but as also there are these private entities that are making some contributions. So they pool their resources to help businesses to increase their online presence, again in social media and all other ways. And many of them don't know how to do this, or didn't know how to do this. And so this program is helping them financially and informationally, and the associations of business improvement districts are playing very significant roles in that too. So that's another example of how the importance of these entities increased. And one more issue that I found out, actually, I found quite curious, at least in some business improvement areas, particularly the ones in downtown areas. And this is, again, not surprising, but I wasn't thinking about that. What they started doing was they started dealing with social problems like homelessness, drug abuse, vandalism, safety, security issues, and so forth. Now, this is not their domain. This is not what they are created for.
Yeah, normally that will be either the city or the province that will take on these issues. But they did embarked into analyzing and trying to find solution, right?
Exactly. So they told me that they were forced into this. They found in themselves, I mean, the business improvement directors, they found themselves in a position to do something about it. And they are spending more and more time, they are getting more and more involved and coordinating and collaborating with, again, governments and other entities and so forth. So I think, again, the big findings are that their importance increased, and particularly in information processing and online presence and other ways of communicating, it intensified, and it increased collaborations among all the partners and these entities, and they became important. And the issue with the social problems also is intriguing to me, and I will follow up on that, and I'll try to learn more.
So, Goktug, what are the next steps in your research? What do you plan to do in the next couple of months?
Well, this was actually, again, coming from this broader perspective of governance, trying to understand governance, and I'm focusing on this particular case, particular issue here. At this stage, what I'm trying to do is, this is an exploratory research. I'm just trying to find out what is happening and who is connecting with whom, and what are the issues and so forth. And I will the next step is take it to a more structured analysis. Particularly, I want to use tools like social network analysis and related tools to understand the structural relationships among these actors in governance processes. Okay. So that will be the next step, and I will expand it from there.
Goktug, on that, I would like to thank you so much for joining us at the Center on Governance for the past few months, and for sharing your knowledge and your expertise with us during this video caption. Thank you so much.
Thank you.